Website called Deadline this morning. A headline, you're going to like this one. It's a review of what happened last night. Democrats had a debate. Writer by the name of Dominic Patton says, final face-off before Iowa caucuses becomes dull night of the living dead. I didn't see it. I was in bed. I was sound asleep. I was thinking about watching some of the president's remarks from Milwaukee last night, but he was running a bit behind, and I was getting tired, and I can watch the replay of both of these things while I'm at my desk early mornings here at News Radio 1310 KLIX. Bill Colley with you, and just a reminder, too, you can check us out online at newsradio1310.com. You can also listen to us online by clicking on the little icon, the button that says Listen Live, or you can listen to us over your smartphone if you download the app, the News Radio 1310 KLIX app. We're at 23 at 6 minutes after 6 o'clock this Wednesday morning. A little later in the program, we're going to check in with State Representative Clark Kaufman. That'll be after 7 o'clock news today. Just getting an update from him, Republican update on some of the goings-on in Boise as the legislative session moves along. And then at 9 o'clock this morning, I have a special guest who has sworn out, has approached local law enforcement and sworn out a request that members, Democrats serving in the House of Representatives in Washington, be arrested on charges of treason. True story. That's coming up a little later in today's program. I didn't see the president. I didn't see the Democrats debate. I would be interested this morning. Nobody has posted any of the overnight ratings yet. These only come out of the big cities where they have the metered markets. You get overnight ratings, and overnight ratings will give us an idea of who was watching the Democrats on CNN and who was watching the president. Well, he was most likely on Fox. And I'd be curious to see who had the better numbers. Fox is no longer carrying the Trump rallies in their entirety. I guess that's because they feel that they've been criticized for giving Donald Trump a bit of an unfair advantage. But we'll see how this pans out as campaign season really gets winding up, because these caucuses in Iowa coming up in early February. Bernie Sanders had the roughest night, perhaps, of everybody on stage. If you've not yet heard, media is amplifying this, probably because of marching orders from the Democrat National Committee. Steve Millington was here yesterday and said the Democrats will do whatever they can to prevent Sanders from getting the nomination, just as they did in 2016. The donor class and Wall Street is a far bigger funder of the Democrats now than the Republicans. Wall Street doesn't want anything to do with Sanders. They don't want Warren either, but Sanders is the guy right now who looks like the threat that he could take not only Iowa, but then perhaps New Hampshire, and then get rolling and perhaps steamroll everybody else during the primary season. So we heard a few days ago, Elizabeth Warren said Bernie Sanders had told her, and when I heard this, I thought, well, I'm going to take this one with a grain of salt, told her in a meeting in 2018 that a woman couldn't be elected president and told her to stay out of the race. And suddenly this media uproar over the last 48 to 72 hours has been, Bernie Sanders must be a misogynist. He hates women. Okay, other than his wife. But you know how these things work. And so Sanders found himself 45 minutes into the debate being asked a question by a young woman who was among the moderators, and he denied that he ever said anything like this to Warren. I'm going to let you hear Sanders, and then I'm going to let you hear Warren, and then I'm going to tell you which one I believe is lying.
CNN reported yesterday that, and Senator Warren confirmed in a statement, that in 2018, you told her that you did not believe that a woman could win the election. Why did you say that?
Well, as a matter of fact, I didn't say it. And I don't want to waste a whole lot of time on this, because this is what Donald Trump and maybe some of the media want. Anybody knows me, knows that it's incomprehensible that I would think that a woman could not be president of the United States. Go to YouTube today. There's a video of me 30 years ago talking about how a woman could become president of the United States. In 2015, I deferred, in fact, to Senator Warren. There was a movement to draft Senator Warren to run for president. And you know what? I stayed back. Senator Warren decided not to run, and I did run afterwards. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 million votes. How could anybody in a million years not believe that a woman could become president of the United States?
I have said often that mainstream media is just an appendage, a tool fellow travelers taking marching orders from the Democrat National Committee. Did you hear how she asked Sanders the question? She said, "Why did you say that?" In other words, she's taking it as gospel that he did. She did not say, "Did you say that?" She said, "Why did you say that?" So she's already accepted the Elizabeth Warren story. Then she turned to Warren and she said to Warren, "What was your reaction when Bernie told you that?" Not, "Did Bernie tell you that? Are you sure?" It was, "What was your reaction when Bernie told you that?" And then listen to Warren. You think that this may have been a setup so that she could get into this?
Bernie is my friend, and I am not here to try to fight with Bernie. But look, this question about whether or not a woman can be president has been raised, and it's time for us to attack it head on. And I think the best way to talk about who can win is by looking at people's winning record. So, can a woman beat Donald Trump? Look at the men on this stage. Collectively, they have lost 10 elections. The only people on this stage who have won every single election that they've been in are the women, Amy and me. The person on this stage who has beaten an incumbent Republican anytime in the past 30 years is me.
So the questioning itself, I think, is a little suspect. And this allows Warren to come out on stage and say, "Oh, all of these men have lost elections. The women here have only won elections, and I have defeated incumbent Republicans." And cheering and screaming and art from all the trained seals that happen to be in the audience. But did you hear what she says in her opening? She says, "Bernie is my friend." But when the debate ended and Bernie reached out to shake her hand, she refused. "Bernie is my friend," and then she twisted a knife in his back, even more deeply than it already was there. Now, here's my take on all of this. Bernie Sanders is saying that he is going to raise your taxes. Bernie Sanders says he is going to spend money like there's no tomorrow. Bernie Sanders is not shy about talking about these things. Most politicians, if they plan to come in and impose Marxist-Leninism on the United States, would try to obfuscate. They'd say, "Well, we need a little bit of this and we need a little bit of that. And working people out there are struggling. And we need to figure out ways to..." But no, Bernie Sanders just says, "I'm going to tear corporations apart. I'm going to take money from the wealthy. I'm going to give it to the little guy, and I'm going to print a lot more money and keep printing it and printing it and printing it." Bernie Sanders, you may not like his politics, but he's pretty straightforward about what his plans for the destruction of the United States are. On the other hand, Elizabeth Warren got a job at Harvard University because she knew that affirmative action would be a way to perhaps get an advantage over other applicants, so she claimed that she was descended from an indigenous tribe in this country. That's why President Trump calls her Pocahontas. She also said, and I remember Rush last week reviewing this on his program, she has said she was fired from a job as a school teacher because she was pregnant. That turned out not to be true. There are several of these stories with Elizabeth Warren that don't add up. I mean, she's an inveterate liar. When I hear her say, "Bernie Sanders told me a woman couldn't win," and then Sanders says, "Yeah, but I had encouraged her to run 4 years ago and she didn't, so I did." And there's numerous times where I'm quoted as saying that, we should encourage more women to get involved and a woman could be president. And then she turns around and says, "Aha, Bernie's my friend, but I'm not going to shake his filthy hand." Something is a little foul here, friends. And you're seeing what's going on, and that is an attempt by the Democrats to cancel Bernie Sanders and to try to get him out of the way and off the stage as quickly as possible. And if you want a Democrat to run this country, these are the same people who called President Trump a liar. Well, this is the way that they run things, by any means necessary. And they're devious, despicable, and disgusting. Bill Colley with you until 10 a.m. on Magic Valley this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. It's 21. We're at 6:15 and coming up the Ag Report and the weather. More on this debate story in just a few minutes. I'll share with you, driving is a little bit better this morning, but you see, there's always a caveat, right? Coming in today, and I was driving down Washington Street, and I could tell because we have good lighting at intersections. And you'd see that, just as I was told yesterday, Ken Menzel had mentioned to us that the intersections were in rough shape yesterday morning. And while the streets are pretty much clear now, the intersections still in some spots do have that ice skating look to them. There's some black ice out there. I don't think it's as bad as it was though driving home yesterday afternoon, and we'd warmed up somewhat. And as I was heading home, I noticed that you still have some of the ice below, but what happens is everything starts to turn as it warms up to slush on the top, and so you got to be careful when you're rounding corners in that situation. But conditions are much better this morning than they were yesterday. We're at 20. It's 21 on News Radio 1310. Yeah, it's 20. Excuse me, 621. Yes, I know. I've only been reading clocks since third grade. It's 621. We're at 20 degrees. There you go. On News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you on Magic Valley this morning. Have any of you seen the Project Veritas video? These are the James O'Keefe videos. James O'Keefe, I haven't talked to him in years. I did an interview with him a long time ago. He's the guy that, he outs various members of mainstream media and also liberal politicians by just simply sitting down, and they go undercover and they get an interview with people who tell them things. And it just confirms what we already know about the angry left in America. But he sat down to talk to one of Bernie's people on the ground, I think in Iowa, and you see the guy, and he's surrounded by a lot of beers that he's emptied. So now he's really just, loosened up and lubricated, and he's talking and just, bragging about what's going to happen if Bernie's the nominee. He mentions they're going to start at the Democrat National Convention by beating up all the cops. Isn't that nice? And then he starts talking about what's going to happen after they win the election, and if people oppose them, people are going to be locked up eventually. It's gulag-bound stuff. I mean, this is what the Sanders people are talking about. Now, could it be that the guy was, 3 sheets to the wind? People say drinking is a truth serum. Other times it isn't. I mean, that could be sometimes, but sometimes people just get a little braggadocious after having a few beers, and it could be he's doing that. But I'd take him seriously, and I take him seriously just simply because I brought this up the other day on another issue. If there's a seed of doubt, then let's err on the side of caution. More on why Sanders is not likely going to be the nominee, as told to us by Steve Millington yesterday, because the establishment within the Democrat Party just does not want him. They're frightened by the direction that he's taking the party, even though he isn't even a member of the Democrat Party. By the way, who's a Democrat? I mean, literally a Democrat. You're going to like this one, although it's not a surprise to people. He's mentioned it before if you read any of his background. Tucker Carlson is a registered Democrat. The Washington Post on its op-ed page made a big deal about this yesterday. The thing is Tucker told media many years ago, told other people in media many years ago that he was a Democrat. That's buried way down in the story. Do you know why Tucker is a Democrat? Because he lives in Washington, D.C., which is a one-party place. Republicans don't win any seats there. So when Tucker bought a house there and started raising his family, he realized he wasn't going to have any say in the politics of the town if he remained a Republican, so he registered as a Democrat. And on primary day, this allows him to vote for people who are least radical among Democrats. But the Washington Post is trying to tell you that, thinking, aha, no, people won't watch him, and we don't want people watching him because we don't like what he says. And if we can get rid of him, then people won't hear some of his views that we don't like, and that'll be a good thing. Then you'll have to take your news exclusively from Pravda on the Potomac. But as it turns out, it's an old story that was buried very deep in the piece as I was reading it. They do this to people all the time. This is from Washington Free Beacon, which is a conservative publication out of Washington, and a writer by the name of Andrew Stiles says, Matthew Dowd, the former Republican strategist turned mainstream liberal pundit, constantly preaches about the need for more love and kindness in politics. Yeah, he kind of looks like one of those guys. But it is occasionally forced to apologize for making derogatory remarks about female members of Congress. So this is a guy who's already shown some signs that he's a little bit of a misogynist. Some degree. I mean, you get a group of guys talking smack together in a diner. They're going to tell some jokes sometimes that liberal women would find deeply offensive because, well, again, men are telling them. But most people might just find them funny. But in modern liberalism, everyone has to be offended 24/7, so But Dowd now is saying, this is something he said about Sanders. Get this. He said, you know one clear way to demonstrate that you believe a woman can and should be president? Don't try to defeat a woman running for president. So he's saying that all these men need to get up. Well, you know, they're tired, evil old white men. And they're evil because, well, they're white men, of course. He doesn't mention he's a white man, but he says that all the white men should get off stage and just let women run. Okay, but what if the candidates who are running as women aren't really very good? This is this identity politics that is taken to the point where it gets ridiculous. So a woman named Wendy C, that's all it reads, she replied to this guy on Twitter, and she says, I'm not a Bernie supporter at all, but I think this Sanders and Warren controversy is completely overblown. Bernie is not a sexist, the woman writes. To which he then, this is Matthew Dowd, then replied, what I find fascinating is that he keeps trying to defeat women running for president. Well, duh, when you're running for president, the goal is to win, not to finish third, fourth, or fifth. You put a lot of time and money to this. The guy had a heart attack a few months ago. He's not doing this just because he feels he needs the exercise. The writer at Washington Free Beacon says, this is indeed a fascinating take, one that implicitly ensnares former President Barack Obama in the Democrat Party's cult of misogyny. Because you remember he said that Hillary Clinton was likable enough. And he defeated her in a primary in 2008. Short memories these liberals had. Maybe it's because they burned up all those brain cells smoking the ganja. Van Jones, speaking of liberals, I used to call Van Jones. He worked for a time for the Obama White House. At a previous radio show, I used to refer to him, every time I mentioned his name on air, I would refer to him as the communist Van Jones. Oh, liberals would get so angry. How dare you call him a communist? Well, maybe because he is, and he's pretty much said that he's a Marxist-Leninist. Yeah, but that's not a communist, that's a Marxist. All right, but you know the apple on my desk, no matter what the color is an apple. Van Jones was appearing on the Clinton News Network, trying to do some analysis following last night's debate, and he says he liked Elizabeth Warren, but he really overall was not impressed.
She never stops being the educator-in-chief. She didn't just say, hey, listen, I'm a woman, I can do it, rah, rah, rah. She made the case that women have been winning in the Trump era and have been leading this movement. And so I think that she used moment well. But that was, as a progressive, to see those two have that level of vitriol was very dispiriting. And I want to say that tonight, for me, was dispiriting. The Democrats going to have to do better than what we saw tonight. There was nothing I saw tonight that would be able to take Donald Trump out, and I want to see a Democrat in the White House as soon as possible. There was nothing tonight that, if you're looking at this thing, you say any of these people are prepared for what Donald Trump is going to do to us, and to see further division tonight is very dispiriting.
In other words, none of these clowns up there can win. But since I'm a far left-wing radical myself, I'm not going to put it quite in those words, but we all know it. Donald Trump is going to eat them alive on a debate stage. As all this was going on, Trump was in Milwaukee, and he was, again, whenever he's at a rally, he seems to be having the time of his life. And as I said earlier, I'd like to see what the overnight ratings are to see which one actually had better numbers. Trump doesn't necessarily have to win in the Nielsen rating from last night, but if he shows that he, puts together a good showing, it could well embarrass a lot of those Democrats who were on stage over at Clinton News Network. Trump, by the way, being in Milwaukee, and a lot of people, just a little political trivia related to Idaho, one of Idaho's most well-known elected politicians, is a native of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You know who that is, right? U.S. Senator Jim Risch. Grew up in Milwaukee, a very blue-collar city, came to Idaho to go to college, and liked it so much here that he never left. We're at 21. The news is on the way in just a moment. Bill Cowley with you on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Want to mention, coming up just after the news at 7 o'clock this morning, State Representative Clark Kaufman will join us on Magic Valley this morning.